My name is Moray. I'm a fashion designer who makes videos on the partners of famous people from antiquity. Today we're going to be discussing Alexander the Great. This was a video request, and before I delve into this video, I just want to thank you guys so much for the nice comments. I even had a couple of emails. I adore history, but I've only been making videos for 2 months, and I really want to improve the way I speak about history. And you guys are learning with me, so thank you so much for the lovely comments, requests we've had on this tiny little YouTube channel. It's really encouraging me. So yes, with that being said, let's talk about our subject today, Alexander. Alexander is probably the most famous figure from antiquity. He was even loved by Julius Caesar. How famous can you be that you are a role model to Julius Caesar of all people? Throughout millennia, his sexuality has been a controversial subject. Today we'll be diving into his friendship with Hephaestion, who is a member of the Netflix program about Alexander's life, has caused a lot of angry news articles. Even the 2004 Oliver Stone film had 25 Greek lawyers threaten to sue Warner Brothers because they said that no historical source showed that Alexander was queer. Well, they dropped the case after they saw the film. So this is nothing new. Alexander is born in July 356 BCE. His father is Philip II, a prominent Macedonian king, and his mother is Olympias, who is known to be a beautiful queen. Let's discuss Philip II's life. Philip II is born in either 383 BCE or 382 BCE. He is of Macedonian nobility, and according to camera person by here, people will be talking about where the Macedonian kingdom was, because it's a Balkan kingdom, but there's a misconception that it's Greek. You can debate that in the comments if you want. Philip II is famous not only for birthing Alexander, but because of his military formations that he used and his skills. Greece goes from the classical era into the Hellenistic era. So the classical era of Greece was built of polises, separate city-states, where, because of Philip II's tutorship of Alexander, Alexander leads us now into the Hellenistic Greek period, and that's why Philip II is so famous, but not as famous as Alexander. Olympias was not Philip II's first wife. He had 7 wives. Actually, polygamy was very, very popular in Macedonia, and Olympias was his 4th wife. And Olympias derives her name from the fact that Philip II allegedly won in the Olympics, and therefore gave her that name when they got married. Olympias marries Philip II in 357 BC, and when she was pregnant with Alexander, she keeps receiving dreams that she is going to give birth to a king. Alexander was given connotations of divinity from a young age, and he was compared to Achilles, who is famous from Homer's Iliad. Let's talk about Alexander's schooling and who tutored Alexander. Alexander and Philip II have a tumultuous relationship. However, Alexander is tutored by Aristotle, who Philip II chose after a lot of looking. And not only this, Alexander grows up with a lot of his future colleagues, if you can call it that name, in something called the Companion Cavalry. Is Hephaestion, who we're going to mention a lot in this video. And under Aristotle's tutelage, Many members of the companion cavalry, along with Alexander, learn about medicine, law, art, and they also read Homer's Iliad, which I have with me right now. I'm personally more of an Odyssey lover, but the Iliad plays into so many parallels during Alexander's life. At the age of 16, Alexander's education under Aristotle had ended. Philip II wages war against the Thracians and leaves Alexander in charge, and Alexander gets his first win, his first namesake. Can you believe that over his short life of 32 years of age, Alexander has 20 cities named after him? However, this is just the first one. And on the 25th of October, 336 BCE, Philip II gets killed by his bodyguard Pausanias at his daughter's wedding. This leaves Alexander to be proclaimed king at the age of 20 years old. Alexander undertakes 10 years of campaigns, and for all of those years he's accompanied by Hephaestion, who is his dearest friend, his lover. Potentially, we don't know, but his dearest friend. And they spent 19 years together in total, and that is a very, very big bond. That is a very, very long friendship. The Battle of Granicus is Alexander's first campaign against the Achaemenid Empire, and I'm really sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, it's the first time I'm saying it. During the Battle of Granicus River in 334 AD, this is Alexander's first pursuit against the Persian Empire, and in this battle we see him engaging in personal combat with many Persian nobles. Alexander wins a decisive victory, and this is due to his father's favourite position, which sounds very, very wrong. His father's favourite formation, the phalanx formation, a very innovative military formation of the time. Now, this is my favourite anecdote throughout this video, because whilst critics are on the fence about Alexander and Hephaestion, I think it's a cute anecdote. And this comes from Arrian's Anabasis. So Arrian's Anabasis is one of the best sources about Alexander. Plutarch is a very good source as well, but I personally really like this one. So following the Battle of Granicus, we see that Alexander travels to Troy. In Arrian's Anabasis, he talks about how Alexander travels to Troy, and Alexander goes to see the tomb of Achilles, and Hephaestion goes to see the tomb of Patroclus. And we're going to talk about Achilles and Patroclus' significance in the parallels he makes to Alexander's life later on in this video. But Alexander was a huge fan of Homer's Iliad, and Achilles and Patroclus are two mythical Greek figures that have a close but homoerotic coded relationship. It's Patroclus who is a mortal compared to Achilles' god, and Patroclus takes Achilles' place in battle and is killed by Hector, and Achilles decides to spark vengeance. And obviously the parallel is there because Hephaestion was a mortal compared to the godly Alexander, who had divine connotations.
What destiny do I have? Well, if I'm Patroclus, I die first. Then you, Achilles.
Stay with me tonight, Hephaestion.
I'll always think of you as the son, Alexander.
The Battle of Issus takes place in 333 BCE. Let's discuss Darius. I think it's called Darius. That's how they pronounce Darius, right? Not Darius. Darius. Yeah, Darius. Let's discuss Alexander's enemy, antagonist, Darius III of the Achaemenid Empire. Darius III is the last king of Persia, and his reign is marked by the threat of the Macedonian Empire expanding. And obviously Alexander wins the Battle of Issus. Obviously Alexander defeats King Darius, and he takes Darius's family as captures, right? He captures Darius's family. And in this family included is Barsine, who is Darius's daughter and rumoured lover of Alexander. His first heterosexual relationship that we can see throughout the timeline. Now, Alexander had a very different approach to conquering than many in history. Instead of conquering, Alexander was very much about integrating with the empire, and he was a Persophile. He was obsessed with Persian culture. Alexander sought to present himself as a ruler who could command an empire and get people on his side rather than making lots of enemies. Another key figure in the aftermath of the Battle of Issus is a eunuch called Bagoas, who, according to sources, was of the flower of his youth, which means he must have been young. I think, looking at it, Bagoas must have been around 14, 15, and Alexander was like quite in his 20s when they met. I also think that the way eunuchs are spoken about throughout history is a bit wrong. Once I have more experience, in a year or two, maybe I'll make some videos about the history of eunuchs. Whilst polygamy was okay for Macedonian rulers, having a eunuch as a companion was not. We can only imagine how Alexander treated Bagoas. Plutarch states about Alexander and Bagoas. After refreshing his forces, Alexander marched through Carmania for 7 days in a revelrous procession carried by 8 horses, while feasting day and night with his companions on a lofty dais. A multitude of wagons followed, some draped in purple and others shaded by fresh boughs, carrying his garlanded commanders and friends, all drinking and toasting with cups and flagons as they marched, while pipes and flutes and song filled the air. Alexander held another grand feast. During a contest in singing and dancing, his favourite Bagoas won the prize, and in his festive attire he passed through the theatre to sit by Alexander, who, amidst the cheers of the Macedonians, kissed him tenderly. Also interesting to me is that Bagoas and Hephaestion, even though they are seen to have same-sex relationship with Alexander, Bagoas was known as an eromenos, which meant that Bagoas was the more submissive young partner in their situation, where Hephaestion has always been seen as Alexander's closest companion, his friend, a valued member of the companion cavalry. So, yes, a lot has happened around the time of the Battle of Issus. Alexander meets Darius III, takes Barsine as a mistress, and also takes Bagoas as a lover. After his victory at the Battle of Issus, we see the Battle of Gergana, and this happens on October the 31st, 331 BCE. The Macedonians and the Persians fought a large battle in northern Mesopotamia. Hephaestion by this point now has moved ranks, and he's the closest he's ever been to Alexander. He is Alexander's bodyguard. Darius, now knowing that he's probably going to die, retreats from becoming a king and goes on the run. This is when we have a general of Bactria. This is when we have a general of Bactria called Bessus, who is determined to find Darius and present him to Alexander. However, Bessus has him killed because he thinks that it's too big of a threat. Bessus and his companions kill Darius by strangling and stabbing him to death in 330 BCE. And want to seize power for themselves. Who is the daughter of a noble who follows Bessus. And according to Plutarch, when Roxana and Alexander meet at a feast, it is love at first sight for him. From this point on, we see that Alexander begins his expedition into modern day India, and Roxana accompanies him. And she also gives birth to their son. However, the baby passes in 326 BCE. 326 BCE is probably the start of the end for Alexander. It's battle. It's the start of battles that are hard on the companion cavalry, and also the start of personal tragedies that will take place for Alexander. You have the Battle of Hydrospes River, and you have the really hard march that Alexander's army made through the Gedrosian desert. However, back in Persia, Alexander wanted to continue his forced integration, and here we see the weddings of Susa. The weddings of Susa are a mass weddings event that happened in 324 BCE, and Alexander wants to marry Macedonian men to Persian women to unite the empire. We see that Alexander, who is polygamous because he's Macedonian, marries Barsine, who is his former mistress, allegedly. And Hephaestion marries Drypetis, who is Barsine's sister. So it's the first mention of a heterosexual relationship for Hephaestion. Now, tragically, shortly after these events, Hephaestion ends up passing. Some sources say it's alcohol poisoning. Some sources say it's fever. However, Alexander mourns Hephaestion so heavily. You can imagine the grandeur of the funeral. And we start to see that Alexander's character changes, his ambitions end up changing. It marks a turning point in Alexander's life and his conquests. Alexander ends up passing in 323 BCE, and his death came only a few months after the weddings of Susa, the mass wedding event. Alexander's death was so sudden that not even Greeks knew about it and believed it. And what's heartbreaking is that Alexander's work came to no heir. Generals fought over who was to control Alexander's empire. Hephaestion was gone, and Hephaestion would have made a good heir. He had only a surviving child with Roxana, but Roxana had been taken hostage and killed in 310 BCE. So nobody had the empire. So that's Alexander's life through his personal relationships. However, I wanted to discuss whether Alexander is straight or gay, or why there is so much intrigue about it. The Greek idea of sexuality is very, very, very different to the modern day idea of sexuality. And whilst we have sources and want to put labels on things, I have no opinion on it. If anything, Alexander was bisexual. But my opinion is sexuality is a spectrum. That's something I personally know. I know that sexuality is a spectrum, but others disagree with me. And besides, I've been studying history now for like 6 months. I just look at the information that's been given to me. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, comment, like, and subscribe, and give me critique, please. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for the request.